All right, so should you sell your car privately or sell it to a dealer? Well, the answer might surprise you a little bit. In today's video, we're going to talk about exactly what I did when I sold my Hellcat for the C8 Corvette. Then we'll talk about exactly how much I paid, how much money I lost on my Hellcat, and how much money the original owner lost on this C8. Let's get right into it. There's a lot to talk about. All right, so today is a numbers video. We're gonna be talking about the specifics, how much I paid for this car, how much the original owner lost on this vehicle, how much I lost on my Hellcat, and how much I sold my Hellcat for. But we're first gonna talk about why it sometimes makes sense to sell to a dealer instead of selling privately. So let's get right into that topic. I still love this car. It's been about a little over a month and it's still an amazing experience. So today we're going to be taking this vehicle for a drive because it's a little over 90 degrees outside and very windy, so not ideal filming situations or environment. So let's talk about the whole story about my Challenger. So you know, how much I listed it for, how much I sold it for, because that will answer the question I posed in the beginning of this video. So I originally intended to sell my Challenger in the low $60,000 range. I thought that was pretty reasonable based on comps I was looking at, online sales, local vehicles here and there. And so I kind of set that as like my baseline, is like I'm not going to sell it for less than maybe $62,000 or so. Maybe 60 is the lowest I would go. And what I've always done when I list a car for sale is I try to find out what can I get at the bare minimum. So usually I go to CarMax, Carvana, I look at local dealership offers, because that gives me a exit opportunity. Like worst comes to worst, this is the lowest I could sell it for and not have to deal with haggling or dealing with tire kickers, etc. Like this is, I'm not gonna go lower than this. If somebody comes in and offers me lower than this amount, I'm just gonna tell them to pound sand. And so I got an offer from CarMax and it was laughably low. I don't even remember the exact number, but I know that the first number started with a 4. So they were trying to buy my vehicle for somewhere around, I think, $48,000 or so. And again, keep in mind, this is a Dodge Challenger Hellcat wide body with roughly 12,500 miles. So this is by no means a beated car, and they wanted to buy it for $48,000. It was a joke. It didn't really give me much of a baseline because it was unrealistic. Now, I also submitted offers to local dealerships and Carvana, and they were kind of in the range between $52,000 to $55,000, which again made sense for a trade-in or a sale to a dealership, but it really wasn't the market value for the car because, of course, the dealership has to go and sell it, and they'd probably sell it in the low 60s, and they'd take that delta as profit. So I kind of gave up on the idea of selling it to a dealer. I figured, you know what, I'm going to stick to my original $60,000 minimum sale price, and I'm going to list it privately. And so that's what I did. I listed it local classifieds websites, Facebook Marketplace, and I listed it for a starting price of about $64,900, knowing that that was definitely a little bit on the high end. I didn't think anybody was going to come in and bite at that level, but it gave me kind of a starting price to start negotiations. And of course, no surprise, nobody really responded to $64,900. So over the course of several weeks, I started lowering the price point, and I got it down to about $62,900. And I was beginning to have some more feedback. I obviously got lowball offers around 60 grand. Some of them got in the 50s, it's just unrealistic ones. But there was one individual that I was working with that we were kind of getting close to about a $61,500 sale price. And I was getting a little bit anxious to sell it. And so it was, pretty close to my range, between 60, 62 grand. If we got it to 61.5, I'd be okay with that, right? It's a little bit $500 less than my top end price. And now, by no means was this an offer or anything like that. Like, we had just decided that, hey, this is the lowest I'll go. They kept the conversation going, which meant that they were still interested in it at 61.5. And so, again, this was not something that I was, already in conversations with at the closing table, so to speak, and they were willing to give me 61.5, but it was looking like that was going to be the case, that they could probably buy the car for 61.5. Well, during that time, all of a sudden I found this Corvette listed at a local dealership. Shout out to them, Monument Motor Company. They're up in Layton, Utah. they took care of me really well in this car, and they did stuff even after I sold, I bought this vehicle. They even still took care of me afterwards. So if you guys need a used vehicle, slightly used vehicle, they specialize in that, and Monument Motor Co., huge shout out to them. They're not paying me to say this, it's just my experience working with them was really good. They were pretty clear from the beginning, and they helped me through the process. So anyway, side tangent, but I found this vehicle, and all of a sudden I started thinking a little bit more about trade-ins again. Now, to take a little sidebar regarding trade-in vehicles, and this really depends state by state, but I think most states honor this type of tax rule where if you're trading in a vehicle, you're only going to pay tax on the portion that's above the purchase price of your vehicle. So what I mean by that is, if I sold my Hellcat for $60,000 and I bought this Corvette for $60,000, I would pay 0 in sales tax, because on the whole, there's no difference between the two. I'm selling for 60, buying for 60. I already paid the sales tax portion on my car, so there's no reason for me to pay the sales tax portion or double tax almost on a different car. It's a really nice rule. I really appreciate that local governments incentivize, used car sales or purchases that way. And so for me, it made sense to start looking at potentially trading in my Hellcat, because even though I was getting lowball offers from dealers, in the mid 50s, when you start accounting for the sales tax, which in my local region is about 7.5%, that comes out to nearly $5,000 that I'd be paying on a Corvette versus potentially putting that money back in my pocket or keeping that money and maybe taking a lower value on my trade-in. We'll talk about the specific numbers here in just a second. But when this vehicle came up, I had reached out to that dealership, and I had wanted to see what they would offer for my Hellcat, because interestingly enough, it's funny how everything happens for a reason. When I was listing my Hellcat on local classifieds websites, there was one dealership also up in Layton, Utah, that reached out to me and offered, sight unseen, just based on the photos and the VIN and everything, $58,500 for my Hellcat. And that was close to what I was looking, right? $60,000 was kind of my minimum, and this was a dealer offering me $58,500. And so at the time, I kind of just discounted it because I wasn't looking at doing that. But knowing that number in my head, I reached out to Monument Motor Co. and I said, hey, can you honor $58,500? Because that is the market price, according to a dealer, for my Hellcat. And, kind of long story short, they were first going to work with the dealership that gave me the $58,500 offer. They ended up finding a dealer in their network that was going to offer the same. And so my Challenger was sold or traded in realistically for $58,500. Now you guys might be thinking, are you crazy? You got offers for $60,000 on Classified's website. You were already in discussions with somebody at $61,500. And yes, it may sound crazy at first, but when you start going back to the other fact I was telling you about with the sales tax consideration, I actually made more than $62,000 on my trade-in for the Hellcat. Let me break down the numbers here. So my Hellcat was sold $58,500. This vehicle that I'm sitting in today was for sale for around $64,999, somewhere like there, in that range. And I, through discussions with them, negotiations, knowing that maybe I could have gotten maybe a little bit more on my Hellcat, whatever. Anyways, we talked him down to $64,500, and that was my out-the-door purchase price for this used 2020 C8 Corvette. So the difference between my trade-in value for the Hellcat, $58,500, versus the purchase price for this Corvette was $64,500. That's about $6,000. So what that means is I was only going to pay my 7.5% sales tax rate on $6,000, not the entire $64,500 that had I sold my car privately and sold it for maybe $61,500, I would then go buy a C8 Corvette for $64,500, $65,000, and pay 7.5% on that. When you look at the net figure, I only paid about $450 on sales tax. So that means that the remaining $4,500 or so, I'm using estimates here because it really depends on the sales tax rate in your local area, but for me it was about $4,500 in savings. That's essentially money back into the value of my Hellcat. So if you add $58,500 plus $4,500, I sold it for pretty much $63,000. The actual number when I did the math back when I purchased it was actually about $62,900 and some change. So I realistically sold my Hellcat for more than even my top line figure because of this tax incentive that the state allows you to do by pretty much swapping vehicles that you own for vehicles that you are buying. Now, it does not make sense in a lot of cases. If, for example, you're buying a much more expensive vehicle, then it really doesn't make that big of a difference. If your vehicle is worth $10,000 and you're buying a $60,000 vehicle, you might be better off selling it privately, because that sales tax savings on the 10 grand that you already spent on your car may not be worth it. And more times than not, it's not worth it. The other situation where it might not make sense is if the dealership where you're looking to sell your vehicle or trade it in doesn't have the vehicle that you want to buy. Now, in my case, Monument Motor Co. was willing to work with the dealership that was offering me $58,500 before they figured out internally one of their own affiliate sister dealerships that was going to offer the same price. But before then, they were going to work with them on doing kind of they would buy it and then they would sell it to that dealership and figure out the tax situation there. But not all dealerships are going to do that. Some are going to say, hey, if you're not buying a car from us, we're not going to buy your car at X amount. And so then it makes it a little bit challenging to realize some of these benefits, because you're kind of slim pickings, especially in the used car market, on what car you can buy and what cars they have for sale. But what I found interesting was, my entire life I've always thought private sale, private sale, private sale. Don't even consider any type of dealer trade-in or anything like that, because they're just going to hose you. You're never going to get the value you need. And it was just interesting to be in a situation where it actually made more sense, because I ended up gaining on a net basis over $1,000 in savings by trading my vehicle in to Monument Motor Co. versus selling it privately. And so that's what I ended up doing. I ended up selling it to Monument, and I ended up taking delivery of this vehicle. So those are the numbers, the purchase price, why private sale might not always be the best option, and dealer trade-in isn't just for simplicity purposes, because that's generally why people do it. It's because it's easier. You get to do it the same day. The dealership handles the documents. You don't have to deal with tire kickers. There's so many advantages to doing trade-in with a dealership, but the downside has always been you're never going to get as much value as if you sell it privately. But that's what I've learned is not always the case. So that's just a little bit of food for thought. So the next part of this video, we're actually going to talk about how much money I lost on my Hellcat, knowing that I sold it for $58,500. How much did I buy it for, and what was that difference between the two? How much did I lose? And we're going to talk about the same for the original owner of this C8 Corvette, because I have the window sticker for this car, and we'll compare it to my $64,500 purchase price. All right, so the numbers are pretty interesting. So I have the window sticker here for my 2020 Dodge Challenger Hellcat back when I bought it new in 2020. Now, I'm not considering sales tax here, doc fees, or anything like that, because I'm looking strictly at the MSRP figure versus, hey, this depends state by state, depends on your dealer, etc. I'm just talking strictly MSRP. We're going to be talking about the differences. So, my vehicle at the time had the wide body package, of course, which added $6,000 to the base MSRP at $58,995. It also had the plus package, which included the ventilated seat option and some of the goodies, the suede door inserts, etc. There's also the Alcantara package, which was about $1,800. Then you've got the blind spot monitoring. That was about $1,300. $3,000 for your 8-speed ZF automatic transmission. The performance spoiler and the Uconnect at the 8.4 inch with the upgraded navigation, everything like that, that added about $1,800. And then there was a gas guzzler tax for about $2,100 with a $1,500 destination fee. So the total out the door MSRP price was $78,560. So a pretty expensive vehicle. Now at the time, back in 2020, this was before all of the markups. This was before they started raising prices on these vehicles. I mean, it was near the end of their run, getting hard to find a Scat Pack for less than $70,000. So at $70,560 for a wide body Hellcat, it is pretty impressive. Especially at the time, I got very lucky and fortunate because I found the right deal at the right time. But nevertheless, 2020, $78,560, not accounting for all the inflation that happened after that. If you take the $58,500 sales price, not including the tax benefits I got, and the $78,560 purchase price, that difference is about 25%. It's actually 25.6% or so. So if you round it up, about 26% is how much money I lost on the Hellcat over the course of about 6 years. Now that's not accounting for the interest that you pay on the loan or the lease that I had at the time, but it lost about 25% value, which honestly surprises me a little bit, because everybody, you talk to saying, oh, the Hellcat's the last of its kind, they're never going to make it again, and so it's not going to lose value. Well, 26% is not crazy amounts by any means. I mean, if you look at any German car, I mean, that's insane. Over 6 years, you're losing 80% of your value. It's actually pretty good, but it's not nothing. And especially considering that I got it at the low end on the MSRP starting price, around, you know, nearly $79,000. That was pretty cheap for a Hellcat, and it only got more expensive. And if the going rate after 6 years, 12,000 miles for a pretty rare looking color with the wide body package, you still lose 26%, that's a decent amount of loss. So now let's talk about this vehicle. So now I've got the window sticker for this vehicle when it was new in 2020 as well. And this is just the base Stingray, the C8 Corvette. Doesn't have the Z06 or anything like that. This was the only one they had at the time, and it's the coupe, not the convertible. So the 3LT package this vehicle comes with added $11,950 on top of the $58,900 starting price. Starting price was very similar to the Hellcat. Then this one had the Z51 Performance package, which was $5,000. You got the magnetic ride control, the front axle lift. Those added nearly $3,200. Then you've got the bigger wheels for $1,500. You've got the carbon flash metallic for about $1,200. And then a few little odd end things like the flash metallic stripe that you see over here in the back and on the front end. Some of the torch red seat belts that you've got. All of that adds about, you know, give or take $3,000 here or there, maybe $2,500. So all options were $27,075. After the destination charge of $1,095, this thing was $87,070. So nearly about $10,000, just shy of $10,000 more than the Hellcat was when it was brand new. Now what's interesting is if you take the purchase price that I did for this vehicle, it's $64,500. and you subtract that from the original purchase price of around $87,000, lo and behold, the difference is just around 26%. It's like 25.9%. So interestingly enough, this one depreciated pretty much the exact same amount as the Hellcat, which again surprises me because the Hellcat is the last of its kind. It's a supercharged engine, and yet this thing lost just as much value. So this thing, in my opinion, held value better than the Hellcat did, and the Hellcat held value worse than what I thought it would. Now, what's interesting about this, though, it's a little bit of a caveat. It's interesting how the higher LT packages, so the 2 and the 3LT, depreciate much quicker than the 1LT. What I found in my search is a lot of 1LTs were selling in the low 60s, high $50,000 range, which compared to this is about $4,000 or $5,000 difference. But brand new, the 2 and the 3LTs were, as you saw on paper, nearly $12,000 more expensive. And so you really don't get that much in the secondhand market by adding these additional option packages like the 2 and the 3LT. It definitely makes it a much more enjoyable daily driver, more comfortable, more GT-like, but it really doesn't give you much more value in the market. So if I was to buy it new, I probably would have just gone for a 1LT, but since I was able to buy one used, it was nice to have the 3LT pretty much at nearly the same price as a 1LT. So that was an interesting caveat with the Corvette. But there you have it, folks. Wanted to break down the numbers for all of you math or geeks out there that really like the numbers and really want to know if you're looking at one of these, you know, what is the price for them? What's the going rate? Well, now you have it. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also check me out on all the social media, same as the YouTube channel name. So next time, everybody, hope you stay schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.